Hello, friends. I'm Joe Lynch from the Logistics of Logistics, and normally I'm calling or doing my podcast from the home, but this week I am at Trimble Insight in Las Vegas, and today's topic is Beyond Intermodal Visibility with my friend Jon Housknecht. How's it going, Jon?
Great, Joe. Appreciate you bringing me on your podcast. Thank you.
So please introduce yourself and your company, where you normally are calling from.
Yeah, I'm Jon Housknecht, and I'm a senior sales manager for BlackBerry Radar, typically based out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area.
Nice. Yep. And so BlackBerry, we used to all have the BlackBerry phones, and you guys have pivoted. And by the way, we were talking about before we hit record, half the companies here have pivoted. I talked to a company yesterday. I was like, that's not what you were doing 2 years ago. They're like, no. So you guys have made a major pivot over at BlackBerry. Please explain what that pivot is.
Yes, Joe, we certainly have. We pivoted about 7 years ago into the intermodal space. Today we have mainly two divisions. We have an IoT division as well as a cybersecurity division, and I actually work within the IoT division under BlackBerry Radar. And our focus, we pivoted, like you said, from consumer handset business into the intermodal space. So today, BlackBerry Radar has products that are all-encompassing asset tracking products for chassis, trailers, rail cars, and containers.
Yep. I know this is very basic, but I'll ask, what is IoT for people who aren't in it day to day?
Yeah, sorry, sometimes we get wrapped around acronyms, but it's Internet of Things, Jeff.
Oh, I thought it was Internet of Trucking. What is that?
Basically, the Internet of Things are all things that are connected in the field. So it could be that you're wanting to connect to your trailers. It could be that you're wanting to connect to some sort of device that's fixed to a fire hydrant. So IoT is all encompassing, and we're just one part of that in the intermodal world.
Yep. And it's funny, I said to you, we talked the day before yesterday, here at the Trimble conference, the Insight conference, this is where the visibility begins. This is the foundational piece of visibility. Much of the industry is using visibility, obviously, and we talk about it, but it's seldom that on my podcast we actually talk about where that visibility begins. And it begins with products like BlackBerry Radar. And I know you guys are a partner with Trimble. Please talk about that partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. This is my first Insight conference, Joe, so it's been absolutely amazing to meet everybody from Trimble, as well as just all the clients that are here. And we really value our partnership with Trimble. We have two integrations today, both with the TMS suite as well as with TruckMate. And for your listeners and your viewers out there, soon to be a third product, TMT. So that's going to be the maintenance portion for Trimble, or I should say maintenance software for Trimble. And they're a valued partner of ours, and customers can take their data from their trailers, their containers, their chassis, or rail cars, and have that integrated into those programs so that they have location data, they have cargo percentage or cargo detection information directly into TMS Suite or TruckMate.
Yeah, we'll get to some of the, the reason we're saying beyond intermodal visibility is because you said it before we hit record. Visibility is like shrug. Yeah, I know where my truck's at. I know where my cargo's at. That's important, but what you guys are doing is way beyond that. We'll talk about that in a minute. So what does Trimble get from partnering with companies like yours? And by the way, if you go out to the floor here, there's just dozens and dozens of companies. It's the who's who of tech out there, and it's all kind of part of this ecosystem that is Trimble. And I will go one step further, talk to Rishi, one of the VPs from VP of Mapping over at Trimble. And he talked about this idea of a workflow where they've got the one division that's Transporian, that is shipper focused. That's the end. Then there's the freight focused. Then there's the cab focus. There's the mapping focus. So if you look at Trimble, it's almost like a trucking workflow business. And all of these companies come together to make that experience for the drivers and the carriers better. Because if we don't do this is the foundation not only of our business but probably of the economy, and it's not always going well. Being a driver is tough, and owning a carrier is tough. We need to make those better job and better businesses.
Yeah, I would agree with what you're saying. And I think both BlackBerry Radar and Trimble are aligned in that ultimately what we're trying to solve for is for our end customers. We're trying to provide data that's going to make them more efficient, that's going to provide them more return on investment, that's ultimately going to put more dollars back in their pockets, whether it be in terms of user experience, like the drivers that you mentioned,
Right.
or potentially saving them dollars from utilization, from dwell and detention. And so I think when you look at the two companies coming together and what we truly add to one another is we're ultimately trying to solve for that for our end customers.
And what's also crazy to me is when you're out there, everybody in tech is here. But what's also interesting is when people say, yeah, we partner with Trimble on this and this, we compete with them over here. But I think that's true outside of this end of tech. Tech tends to always work together. You look at the internet, it is made up of competitors all coming together.
Yeah, and ultimately, we are here for our end customers. Like neither one of us or all the dozens of providers that are out there, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our end customers. So I think at the end of the day, we are trying to solve for what's going to help that customer.
Yep. So let's talk about your IoT piece, the Internet of Things, Internet of Trucking for some. And so you're not tracking everything. We had lunch together today, and you said, "No, you don't track the trailers or the tractors.
Right.
You track the trailers."
Correct.
Please elaborate.
Yeah, there's plenty of what I would consider generalists out on the floor today that are trying to track a lot of different pieces of equipment. BlackBerry Radar has been laser focused in terms of staying in their swim lane of intermodal non-powered assets. That's defined, what I stated earlier, your containers, your chassis, your rail cars, your trailers. So we have not only developed software that is directly for the intermodal space, but also our hardware is designed specifically for those pieces of equipment. I don't actually have the H2 right here in my hand, but when you actually see our hardware, it's designed to fit directly into the corrugated spaces on a container. So we truly are dedicated to the intermodal space, and we've created the most rugged and reliable devices that are out there.
Yeah, I've seen it. You could drop it on the ground. It's not going to matter. And so when you say you'll track a tractor, not a tractor, a trailer that goes on a regular truck or...
Yeah, they're hooked directly to a regular truck. And in a lot of instances, every operation or every business is different in terms of how they operate. And so we just had lunch with a gentleman who does not actually drop his trailers at locations. They go from warehouse to store and then back to that warehouse or distribution center. But in a lot of models, especially in the intermodal world, trailers are dropped, and they're dropped for extended periods of time. And when that happens, there can be charges if they're dropped for 3 days or 4 days. And our solution can easily give you that information. It's canned and built into our software.
Yep. It's interesting because there are a lot of companies out here that are, again, foundational to the visibility. But you guys are going, again, beyond the visibility. And you're showing me some stuff, some of this, I guess it's the dashboard.
Yep.
About some of the stuff you track. I thought it was really helpful so talk a little bit about how full a trailer is.
Yeah. So we stated earlier that today it's table stakes just to give you location. So
and you can't impress anyone with going, I'll tell you exactly where your stuff's at. They're like, yeah, that's kid stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that with a lot of different solutions today. But our gateway or our hub is paired with sensors onto your equipment. And we can extract data like what you're talking about and tell specifically how filled that trailer is. So we can tell you, is it 27% filled, 56% filled, or 99% filled? And that is excellent data for those of us that are involved in the intermodal world. Most of the time, we want to try to transport at 100% if we possibly can.
Yeah, we all know empty miles are bad. Now, somebody said this to me a few years ago, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. He said, we all know that empty trucks, empty miles are bad, but what about half a truck, half empty miles? And I was like, oh, yeah. And I know trucks are less than 70% full on average, right?
Yeah, it depends on the operation again, Joe. Like every business is different, and I never make any assumptions when I speak to a company. When I was on the floor today, It runs the gamut in terms of different operations and different goods that they're transporting. So in some cases, yes, we were accurate. 70% is not good. But in some cases, realistically, you can't be more than 70%.
Right.
But those sensors can provide you other key and critical pieces of data. One thing that we're hearing, Joe, today that is just increasing all over the country, and I work within both, I should say, all across North America, Canada, US, and Mexico, is theft.
Yep.
And almost every single transport company I speak to or carrier has a theft story. And so one of the pieces of data we can provide you is door open, door close.
Yeah, I
and,
saw that.
And that's critical and crucial.
Yeah, I was just before COVID, I was advising a company and selecting a transportation partner. And there was freight that came from down in Mexico, way up 12 hours south of the border. And it was going to Laredo. So it was going to go from truckload to LTL when it hit Laredo. Mm-hmm. And so when it got there was freight missing. And I remember I said, okay, they got broken into. They said, it did stop. It's 12 hours south of the border. And they said, it did stop. And I said, did it stop in a lot with cameras? They said, yes, but we didn't see anything. And I said, is the seal broken? They said, no. And then I said, then how did anything get stolen? They go, and they showed me 2 pictures. This is when we loaded it. This is when it got to Laredo. And I go, yeah, but the seal's not broken. You could tell clearly stuff was taken out of the truck. Yep. They had taken the doors off. And so they kept the seal. And by the way, the stuff they were stealing, we were all perplexed. Like, what the hell are they doing with this? This was not something that a consumer could use. And it was very sophisticated, though, because, again, it was stolen by everybody involved, totally professional. Everybody did the right thing. But somewhere along the line, in the middle of the night, the door opened, and we don't know when. But you guys, if they were using BlackBerry Radar, it would say, this is when it opened.
There would be multiple alerts in that situation. And Joe, I've heard my fair share of crazy stories. Rail is probably one of the most challenging, but I've heard stories where a train is traveling down the track and not even stopping, and an entire load of motorcycles just disappear. And so they're breaking the doors and just throwing goods right off of the train and salvaging what they can. There's multiple pieces of data in your scenario that we would have alerted a customer to. So we alert not only to door open, door close, but cargo percentage change.
Yep.
So obviously in that situation, your cargo percentage would have changed. And then impact is another one. We have the ability to actually measure 3 different ways impact on our device. And so we know if there's going to be a force from the side.
Oh, it feels that thud as you're knocking the doors off the hinges.
Yeah. So there's many ways that we would have the ability to help you with theft in that situation.
Yeah, and what I'm thinking about is that if I can see what percentage of the truck is full. Let's just say you've got 7 DCs, and you say, you know what? On the DC that John's running, the trucks are like 75% full. Joe's running a very similar one. He's only at 45% full. What are we doing different? And is John got a best practice that we got to bring across all of our DCs? We don't have that data right now. We're eyeballing it.
Yeah, no, we absolutely can provide you that data. And in a lot of instances, the alerts it's more of a red flag to you as a business owner, as a fleet manager, as an operations manager, for you to inspect what you expect. You may get a question about percentage of cargo, right? How could we run more efficiently, or how could we route our trucks more efficiently so that we can load them at a higher percentage? I've got a great case study down in Houston where we had a customer who had our device on a chassis, and he leases those chassis out, and there was an impact of 7.1 G-force on that chassis. So obviously he can't stop at that point and fix that situation, but it's a red flag to that owner to inspect that chassis when it comes back in.
Yep.
And then hold that driver accountable.
Yeah, and you said when we were eating lunch that some of these yards are enormous.
Huge.
And I remember being in Laredo and driving by, I think it were FEMA lots where they had the FEMA trucks, and or trailers. It was literally miles of trailers. They all looked the same. So when somebody said, hey, John, Joe, go out there and check out that that trailer. You're like, whoa, which one, man?
Yeah, I tell you, the chassis yards, you sometimes see them stacked 5 high, and they're huge in terms of just size of some of the lots that you see out there. One of the things that is really a great selling feature of BlackBerry Radar is that we have a completely wireless device. And so with some of the other solutions that you see on the market, in the chassis situation, you may have a chassis that is not exposed to the sunlight, that can't actually charge via solar. So we have a self-contained battery solution that in that situation where chassis are stacked 5 high, you are able to locate your chassis within that yard, even though it may be a mile long and they're all stacked 5 high.
So how long does that battery last?
5 years. One thing that we really pride ourselves on, or many things that we pride ourselves on, is the easy install, but 5-year battery life on not only our hubs and gateways, but also our sensors as well. It's a lithium metal, which works in extreme conditions a lot better than lithium ion batteries. So take your oil fields of Texas all the way up to the snowy areas of Canada and Alaska. It will work in negative 40 degrees all the way up to 150 degrees. So no worries when it comes to extreme heat.
Anywhere you're taking it on this planet, you'll be okay.
For the most part, yeah.
Also interesting to me is if you and I were running a business and we had all these, whether they're the chassis or the trailers, we want to know how much we're using them.
Absolutely.
And I know there's tools for managing how much. I'm sure somebody is doing that calculation right now, but I suspect many are doing it manually. It's a lot easier to say, I know how many hours my trailer moved this month. And then you can start again looking and saying, hey, John's DC is keeping the trailer utilization really high. Joe's got another DC a region over. Why isn't his quite as high? What can we learn? And those savings are enormous. And I always, every time I have these conversations, it reminds me, I spoke to Walmart, and I'm going to speak to them soon again. But I talked to Doug Estrada, and he said years ago, Walmart went to their their washing machine soap manufacturer and said, hey, you have too much water in all these containers that you're selling us. And we are transporting thousands and thousands of truckloads full of water. We would rather it get more concentrated and saved thousands of trailers. And thousands of trailers means thousands of dollars, millions of dollars is being saved, but also better for the economy. We're all being asked, how do you get more sustainable? How do we make these supply chains more sustainable? I don't think there's any major shipper who's not looking for ways to be more sustainable. And we in the provider community have to do that now. And I always tell people, you can't just add a PowerPoint slide saying our commitment to the environment. You have to be able to say, here's what we measure, and here's how much better we are than last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joe, there's no shortage right now of folks that are out here on the floor that want to see this industry increase and pick up in volume. But in times like these right now, it's critical to really understand your utilization of your fleet. And you may have 1,000 trailers. Do you really need 1,000 trailers? And BlackBerry Radar's solution can help you measure what you're talking about in terms of your utilization. Perhaps maybe you only need 950 trailers. And so by being able to potentially be more efficient in how you are shipping and maybe structure your routes differently, you could potentially sell off 50 of those trailers, which is real money for your organization.
You can spend that money on cool tech from Trimble.
Giving us a raise.
Yeah, exactly. You can blow that money on food and shelter.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because I'm also, every time I talk about with somebody like you, who's basically creating a whole bunch of new value just by creating new data. And I'm a logistics and supply chain guy my whole career. So I would always say, whatever business I was in, when I was in automotive, I said this, when I was in logistics, I said it, I just want to look at maybe 5 key performance indicators. And I'll pick some sort of cost indicator, on-time performance. I like damage percentage, maybe billing accuracy, maybe something with sustainability at this point. And because and by the way, there is tons more data than that, but I would say those 5 things were right. The other 40 columns are good.
I should have taken notes on that.
Right. But the thing is, now I'm asking for 5 key performance indicators because we're humans and we don't process that way. But now we have all these, half the companies here, and probably you guys too, have the ability to create a lot more data, and we can plug those into AI, some sort of engine, and get insights that none of us could come up with in our own head.
Yeah, and I think one of those we touched on a little bit earlier is maintenance, right? And life cycle of your equipment. That's one of those unsung heroes out there, or one of those things that isn't necessarily focused on. That's something that I think is near and dear to my heart, and it's one of the reasons why we are working towards integrating with Trimble for their TMT software so that we can bring in location data directly into their platform.
Yeah, and so Trimble's TMT, that's transportation
management. Oh no, I'm sorry, transportation maintenance.
Yeah,
you put me on the spot on that.
Yeah. It's their maintenance software, and I
Yeah.
think it's connected to their inspection software.
Yeah.
And what we're trying to prevent is equipment going out on the road and getting 100 miles from the terminal and breaking down. And
Right.
we think of the tractor, but it's not just the tractor, it's also the trailer. So what Trimble's trying to get to is, let's understand which trailer is ready to go on the road. And if one is not ready to go on the road, let's do that inspection. Again, they have that inspection software, and get that maintenance done. By the way, I've heard this many times that Europe does a better job of this. And it's set up a little different. It's not as wide open as the US. But we have a shortage of mechanics. And a lot of times, if your trailer or your tractor dies, they have to order a part, and then they have to wait till that mechanic is ready. Losing a week is huge for a trucking company, huge for an intermodal company.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And I have a background and a passion for safety. I understand that. I've actually been out on the side of the road with Arizona State Patrol and done road checks. And if you are not doing the proper maintenance on your trailers and on your trucks, those can be taken out of service. And you want to see something that's devastating to a company is all of a sudden have a driver or a truck put out of service, and now you've got to have somebody else come out and pick up that load. It's a huge cost.
Reputation isn't getting any better that day either.
No. So yeah, I mean, there's some real expenses to a company if they're not maintaining their equipment the way that they should be. And it's something that I've worked in that field in the past, and I'm very passionate about making sure that you're keeping a safe organization.
That sensor you have, I saw it. It's in your booth. How many pieces of data does it provide right now? And is that number always growing?
Yeah, so we have 2 main sensors at BlackBerry Radar right now. One would be able to extract the cargo percentage, and we have another one that actually can actually extract temperature, pressure, and humidity as well. Really, it depends. I go back to the customer's needs. Like, every single customer is going to be different in terms of what their needs are. So we don't blanket just recommend one sensor over the other. It really depends on how you operate. And just to give you an idea of how I would typically discern that, I need to understand how you're loading those trailers. It's important for me to know in order to recommend one of those over the other. Absolutely, if temperature is something that is important to you, that you want to be able to extract alerts on, we have that capability in one of our sensors. And yes, it is always changing. Right now, we're experimenting with 2 different sensors that will actually be able to extract weight on a trailer or on a chassis. And we also have another one that we are trying to improve our door open, door closed to actually make it even better than it already is. We all are always innovating. It's something that I think BlackBerry's known for back in the handset days. And we continue to do that in the intermodal space with our hardware.
Yep. And I know BlackBerry is a Canadian company, but clearly doing business not only in Canada, but also U.S. Do you work globally?
We do, yeah. Still based in Waterloo, Ontario, and we work all in North America. My team specifically works all over Canada, United States, and Mexico, but Yes, Joe, we have units deployed globally, and our units will work in 65 countries around the world.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yep.
And again, I'm thinking about this in context of Trimble. Somebody said to me yesterday, Anthony Satarja from Parade, he said, Joe, he says, we're using AI, and he says, and we need everything connected to get the AI, the data we want. And I'm assuming a lot of the data, if somebody's working with you guys, and now all of a sudden their data is all connected to the rest of their systems if they're part of Trimble.
Going back to the old BlackBerry that you are familiar with, data and security are synonymous with the BlackBerry name. And if you are a client of ours, your data is your data. We do offer very easy ways to integrate your data through open APIs, so you can take that data and put it into a homegrown solution. But of course, if you are a Trimble customer, we obviously would advocate for you to use TruckMate or TMS Suite.
Yeah. So if they're using, say, the data inspection systems or the equipment inspection tool that they have at Trimble, and also the maintenance tool, yeah, you can share all that information.
Soon to be, yeah, TMT soon to be. We're not there today.
Okay, well, you're getting there.
Next 6 months we'll definitely be integrated. Yeah.
And again, I think what's also happening, I read a book about AI a few years ago, and it said that when we feed the AI information, it comes up with insights that are not intuitive to us. We might look at data and we could brainstorm and say, oh, look, we came up with all these great ideas. AI is looking at it differently, and sometimes it's going to come up with novel ways to use that information. And so as the more information we have, I've always said this, we've always had tons of data. 20 years ago, a lot of it was in file cabinets. Today, it's online, but it's siloed and it's not usable. And what we're trying to get to is a place where all that static, trapped data is shared in a way that we can have dynamic insights.
Yeah, I'd agree. Data can be overwhelming at times. And I've worked with a lot of different companies and organizations where they're getting so many different data points, you just don't know how to manage it all. And we really work at BlackBerry Radar to give you the data that you need within the intermodal world. We try to narrow it down so it's information that you can truly use and make your organization more efficient. We don't want to give you 1,000 data points that you can't use, and everything within our platform is customizable. So what may be important to you may not be important to a company right next door. But we make it customizable, and we're willing to innovate and work with you for specific needs.
Yeah. So I saw your dashboard at your booth the other day, and it's an easy look at. It's easy to look at. And by the way, that's the upgrade that we've seen in the whole industry. Is I said in my last podcast, I'll say it again. Not so long ago, we had clunky interfaces, and our data was available, but not necessarily really usable.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do anything with it because it was in a format that wasn't right. Yours was good, so I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's wrap this bad boy up. I want to get your final thoughts, and maybe you can wrap up again. Talk a little bit about your partnership with Trimble, and also the value you're providing to all those intermodal customers, all those trailer customers.
Yeah, so bringing our data, the BlackBerry Radar data, into Trimble will give you an additional layer of information in terms of where your assets are located, specifically those non-powered assets. And Joe, you'd be surprised how many companies I work with that are not tracking those today, even though this type of technology has been out for quite some time. So it gives you that extra layer, and it's integrated directly into the Trimble software. So we'll give you that visibility of whether or not your chassis are mounted or unmounted. We'll give you that visibility as to whether or not your trailer is 100% full or if it's 2% full. We'll give you the visibility out in the field as to whether or not your handbrake is engaged on a rail car. We haven't really touched on rail cars a lot here today, but it's just part of the ecosystem that we have and the information that we can provide you. And ultimately, we want to give you the data that you as a business owner specifically need.
Yep. By the way, every time you're talking about these yards, I always think, I'm an automotive guy originally, and wherever you go, there'd be like, look at those abandoned trailers out there. And you go, I don't know if they're decommissioned and just being used for storage, or somebody didn't give them back. There's always, and when you go down to Texas, where you're from, especially near the border, there's just miles and miles of equipment, and I don't know how you effectively manage it unless you've got some tools like this. Wouldn't want to do it manually. They all all the trailers look the same. All the chassis look the same.
I ran into a gentleman a few weeks ago that took 9 days to do a yard check.
Yeah, and that's a pretty thankless job.
Pen and paper.
You guys live in a desert, so it's not easy doing that.
Yeah.
So anyway, what I'll do, John, is I'll put a link to your LinkedIn profile, link to your website, and any of the links you and your marketing team give me, I'll put those in the show notes. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, Joe, thank you for having us here today. It's been a pleasure, and I appreciate you connecting with me. Thank you.
Yep. And thank all of you for listening to my podcast. Your support is very much appreciated. Until next time, onward and upward. You have been listening to the Logistics of Logistics podcast, where we engage with leaders in the logistics and supply chain community. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave us a nice review on Apple or Spotify or wherever else you listen. Also, please check out our videos on YouTube and connect with us on LinkedIn. We're very big on LinkedIn. And you can also reach us on the logisticsoflogistics.com, our website.